So far this year, we've had Gamergate. This is about how women are treated in the video gaming industry. Then there was Shirtgate, featuring that unfortunate shirt worn by a space scientist. He did television interviews, of course you might remember this, after the Philae landing, and he was sporting a shirt with scantily clad women on it. We'll talk about that in a moment. First of all, Naomi, just define, because many of our listeners won't know about Gamergate, many will. What was or is Gamergate?
So Gamergate is an online social media rabble of people who seem to have been drawn together mostly by the idea that women are saying things and doing things in the region of video games, and they're unhappy about that. So it all kicked off this summer when the disgruntled ex-boyfriend of an independent games developer, Zoe Quinn, he posted a screed about how she had cheated on him, and this was then grabbed and taken up by various bulletin boards and various sort of discussion forums who were determined to prove that there had been some ethics in video games journalism violation because someone that she knew had written a piece about a game that she wrote. I mean, goodness me, if these people knew about books journalism or play journalism and how much cronyism and friendship there is involved in that.
That does seem naive on their part, because this is the way the world works, isn't it?
Yes. And you know, actually, video games journalism is, if anything, probably slightly better than average compared to, you know, log rolling that happens in other industries.
But the impact on this unfortunate young woman was immense, wasn't it? What happened to her?
This would be a joke if the consequences hadn't been so serious. So Zoe Quinn was not only threatened, but she was what they call doxxed, D-O-X-X, which means that all of her details about her personal life were put online. So that's her home address, her home phone number, her email was hacked. I believe even her bank accounts might have been hacked, or there were attempts to do that. So essentially she was made completely unsafe in her own home. There were very credible threats of violence towards her. There were rape threats made towards her. It's similar to the kind of things that happened to Caroline Criado Perez last year when she had the temerity to suggest that we might have a woman on our banknotes. This has also happened to other women who have spoken out saying that maybe some video games are a bit misogynist. So the games designer Brianna Wu has also been chased from her home. The critic Anita Sarkeesian, who has said, some of these games are a little bit anti-feminist, has that somebody made in response to this a online game in which you beat up Anita Sarkeesian until she is bleeding and bruised, which is, I mean, I just think probably not a contribution to civilised discourse.
Except it is only the minority, and there'll be many people shouting at the radio saying exactly that now. And let's just get another point of view, because I take your point of view, absolutely, but there are others. This is Milo Yiannopoulos. He's writing a book about Gamergate.
2014 has a reasonable claim to being a year when feminism went slightly out of control, and Gamergate's perhaps the best example of that. Now, it will seem to most of your listeners like quite an odd battleground for the culture wars, and an odd thing. Video games seem like an odd thing to speak about in any case when we talk about women and women's rights and the relations between the sexes. But there's a sort of brand of feminism that seems to dominate in the pages of The Guardian and in academia generally, which has moved quite far away from the noble and necessary pursuit of the equality of the sexes, and seems to be quite concerned with man-hating and policing culture and clamping down on language that some people find, I think most of us would say, spuriously offensive. And,
well, can you give me an example?
Yes, I certainly can. So in the games debate, for example, you have feminist critics like Anita Sarkeesian who create these very peculiar videos that cherry-pick scenes from video games to give the impression that there is an industry-wide problem with the depiction of women in video games. And there's also a problem in video games with feminist critics and feminist game developers, and these are sort of gender activists who publicize death and rape threats towards themselves, some of which are absolutely horrific, and nobody should ever be on the receiving end of, but which there is some suggestion in the gaming community aren't always quite what they first appear.
You can't possibly prove that, can you? And what about, are there any male equivalents? Are there men who are routinely threatened with sexual violence in this world?
Well, I think that question's slightly presumptive, because I don't think that there are women who are routinely threatened with sexual violence.
Well, clearly there are some, Milo.
Well, I think there are women who have been threatened, but I don't think that the video game industry is a place where women are routinely threatened with sexual violence. It seems an extraordinary thing to say, simply not justified by the facts. What does happen sometimes is it being a very boyish environment, with male products created for men. Some women decide that the sort of breasts and explosions and all that kind of stuff that happens in some of the big AAA video games aren't for them. That's fine. I mean, they can play other video games. What's extraordinary is when campaigners start to allege sexist harassment and abuse and threats on behalf of a community which, in my reporting experience at least, is one of the most diverse and inclusive I've ever encountered.
But you understand, surely, that there is the view, held not just by women and not just by feminists, that the world of gaming is a male one, and there are plenty of men within it who would like it very much to stay that way.
Well, I think it's certainly true that gaming is overwhelmingly male. Hardcore gaming, which is what Gamergate's about, which is what this debate is about, refers really to the culture that surrounds games like Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike. These are first-person shooters and it's these sort of immersive games, the ones that are always criticised by places like the Daily Mail for violence and sex and all that kind of stuff. The people who really get into those games are overwhelmingly male. Now, it's almost certainly true, yes, that there will be some men who prefer that it stay a male space, but they're in the minority, and I think it's very easy to characterize an entire subculture by its most extreme fringe elements.
That's the view of Milo Yiannopoulos. Naomi, what do you think about that?
Yes, it's fascinating that it could be characterised as the year that feminism went out of control, when obviously this was the year that feminists were just able to, first of all, speak out about some of the problems that are happening in a lot of different areas and were being taken seriously. That's what it means to go out of control, to be taken seriously. I think what we're seeing here actually is progress in a weird way, because first of all, we're seeing that a lot of these misogynist comments and rape threats and death threats are obviously the worst aspect of that, but a lot of sort of people who really just don't want any kind of feminist or female influence in various different parts of culture are now being exposed, explored, people are talking about it. And I think what's also happening, and as a gamer I'm very excited about that, is that games are becoming more seriously accepted as an art form, as a cultural form. That means that they're exposed to the kind of cultural criticism that any other industry will get. And at that point, a little group, and on that I think Milo is actually right. It's a very small group who are unfortunately able to have a very large impact because of the horrible threats they make.
Why do we let them then? Why do we let these people, because they are a minority, why do we let them have influence?
I mean, it's very difficult to know how to stop individuals from acting. What we have here is a kind of leaderless movement. So it used to be the case that if you had a sort of big movement that was targeting somebody, you would be able to go to the leaders and say, call off the dogs, stop it now, stop harassing these people. And we saw this with the Natskis, with the Scottish nationalists online, who also did some harassment and sort of angry language, and people were saying, well, call them off. And it's hard to know how to if there's no leader to talk to about it.
Now, what about Shirtgate? This was Dr. Matt Taylor. He was involved with the European Space Agency with that incredible feat. There is no denying the marvellous, stupendous thing, getting a probe to land on a comet. How fabulous. We had Monica Grady, the space scientist, on Woman's Hour last week explaining her role in it. He wore a dodgy shirt and got a load of aggro. Naomi, I put it to you that it was all a bit over the top and ridiculous, and he was wearing a shirt a female friend had designed for him.
I've heard both sides of this argument. One side seems to be saying the fact that he wore that shirt completely cancels out the amazing achievement of landing on a comet. No. But also the amazing achievement of landing on a comet does not cancel out the fact that it's not okay to wear a shirt with a lot of naked ladies on it when you're representing an enormous scientific achievement.
He may very well have had other things on his mind that day. And
he might, but in that case, I think it's an institutional failure, in the sense that there should have been somebody to have a little look at him before he went on air and just go, love, this is amazing, just change the shirt.
Okay, maybe they should, but don't feminists just have to pick their battles?
I mean, in a way, yes, but in a way, culture is a really important battle. And actually, we do have a tremendously important battle in terms of getting women into science and technology. And this is not the kind of thing, a high-profile moment like this does not send the message, hey, we're very welcoming and equal towards women coming and working in this industry.
Naomi Alderman, thank you very much for talking to us. Have a very happy new year.
And you, it's been a joy.
Do you mean it?
Of course I do.
Yeah, I hope she's not being sarcastic.
Wouldn't come on otherwise.
Very sensitive. You can continue the debate, as many of you are, in a spirited fashion on Twitter, at BBC Woman's Hour. That's how you reach us.